this working group meeting. And I am going to pull up the in order for us to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA, the Affordable Housing Advisory Council needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the Affordable Housing Advisory Council is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I am going to conduct a roll call and ask each member participating to state your name, the location from which you are participating. I ask each of you place close attention to ensure you can hear each other. Following the roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. I'm going to begin myself, Carrie Wilson, calling from Reston, Virginia. Rip Sullivan is not able to join us. Jennifer Adeli.
Jennifer Adeli, Great Falls.
Thank you. Cookie Blitz. Marlene Blum. John Boylan. Nick Bracco. Eduardo Condi. Joe Fay. Alice Foltz. Richard Kennedy.
Richard Kennedy in Reston.
Reverend Dr. Carrie Kincannon.
Carrie Kincannon, Fort Hunt.
Michelle Crocker.
Michelle Crocker, Alexandria.
Molly Benzinger Lacey. David Levine.
Dave Levine, I'm calling from Bedford, Massachusetts.
Furthest distance, Ken McMillan. Wendell.
I need to book Ken in from the attendees. One moment.
Okay. I'll come back. Gwen Minton.
Gwen Minton, Reston, Virginia.
Joe Mondoro.
Joe Mondoro, Fairfax.
Shelley Murphy.
Alexandria.
RJ Narang.
RJ Narang, McLean.
Ava Nguyen.
Ava Nguyen, McLean.
Mary Payden.
Mary Payden, Mount Vernon District. Fairfax
Michael.
County.
Thank you, Mary. Michael Perez. Jerry Poggi.
Poggi calling from Vienna, Virginia.
Dr. John Smoot.
John Smoot, Alexandria.
Julie Stranley. Dr. Eleanor Vincent.
Eleanor Vincent, Gaithersburg, Maryland.
Dr. Stephen Wolf.
Wolf, Fairfax.
And AJ Zaman. Apologies. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to pass the virtual gavel to Jerry Poggi so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. And Jerry, I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Affordable Advisory Council.
Jerry's mic is muted.
Oh,
Jerry, I think you need to repeat that.
Kerry has moved the motion that everybody's voice can be heard. It's so moved. Do I have a second?
Second, Kennedy.
Thanks, Dick. All in favor, say aye or raise
Aye.
your hand.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you. Having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the Affordable Housing Advisory Council to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the Affordable Housing Advisory Council and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the Affordable Housing Advisory Council may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated audio conferencing line, and that the public must access this meeting by calling the information provided on the website, and which will be included in the minutes.
It is so moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The chair votes aye, and the motion passes unanimously.
Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda are necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Affordable Housing Advisory Council's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities.
It is so moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The chair votes aye, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Carrie. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you all. This isn't getting any easier. We're very excited, though, to jump in, and thank you all for joining us today. We have a good and packed agenda. And I just wanted to review the agenda that is published and that is in front of you today. We're first going to have a budget presentation on the Fairfax County 2023 budget. And then a new to the agenda at the request of one of our council members, an update on the point in time and continuum of care committee, so that we may understand that and how that comes into our work plan. Then we are going to review the draft work plan, talk about the strategic areas, and ask some questions about each strategic area. And then we'll talk about our next meeting, which has been scheduled and published as March 25th, and then any other business. So that's our agenda for today, and I am going to turn it over to Tom Fleetwood to begin the first item on our agenda.
Very quickly, we've had a couple of AHAC members join the call that we need to hear where they're from. I know we have Ken McMillan and Julie Strandley joined, and I'm not sure if anybody else also joined. So if we could just hear where they're from real quick. Calling in from, I should say.
Hi, this is Julie Strandley. I'm calling in from the Mason District.
Thank you, Julie. Ken McMillan. We can see you. We'll come. There you are. Ken, you're muted. Or not. We will come back to Ken. There he is.
And I just took you off mute. Are we able to hear you now?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can.
Okay. Yeah, I'm calling from the Providence District in Fairfax, Virginia.
Terrific. Welcome. And I think I'm not seeing any others at this time, so I'm going to.
Tom Boyle in Centerville.
Oh, wonderful. Sorry, John. Great. With that, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. And first of all, good afternoon to everyone. We are really pleased to be here. And as we continue our work with the Affordable Housing Advisory Council and its continued evolution as well. For the first thing that we had wanted to work with you on and to inform you of is the advertised budget, or I should say the county executive's proposed budget. And we're going to ask our Director of Financial Management, Seema Ajrawat, to take you through a presentation with all the details. Seema.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. There you go. All right, very pleasure to be here today. So I hope that everyone had a chance to watch the presentation of the county executive. What I will be presenting today is the 2023 advertised budget as it relates to the FCRHA, taking the highlights that were presented and basically talking about what it pertains to housing and the population that we're concerned with for housing. So next slide. So some of the highlights that were mentioned in the county exec's budget is that real estate tax rate does remain unchanged. It's 1.14 per $100 of assessed value. But keep in mind that the assessments around our region are up, so it does affect the property values around our county. The schools transfer has increased 112.6 million over 2022, and there is something for the employees of Fairfax County where there is a proposed market rate adjustment of 4.01%, as well as a 2.15% increase to cover pay for performance and longevity. Next slide. The federal funding for 2023 that is to highlight for the group is there's 111 million for American Rescue Plan Act funding that was received in 2021 that will continue to be used in 2022 and 2023. Of that, 30 million is allocated to housing for use in 2022 and 2023, and it will be tied to affordable housing development. Also, there's CARES Act funding that was received, and that's 200.2 million for the county, and that will be used for programs related to the pandemic and other issues that we are facing countywide. Next slide. It's important to understand the outlook of growth and the revenues across the county because that forecast impacts housing and the opportunities that we have for affordable housing. So you can see that 2021 and 2022 growth is 0.7% for 21, 1.3 for 2022. You'll see that 6.8% is noted for 2023. A lot of that has to, is basically concerned with assessments being up, revenue growth possible due to real estate because a large percentage of the revenue that comes into the county is related to real estate, and then the federal money that we have received. 3% is the growth expected in 2024, which is more in the normal range. Next slide. The value of a penny. The penny is 29.37 million. Why is that important for housing? Because our baseline for what we get for affordable housing development is half a cent, and half a cent is 14.68 million for 2023, and that does go into our AHDI fund. It's called Affordable Housing and Development and Investment Fund, and it used to be called the Penny Fund. So we have that baseline continuing for 2023. Added to that baseline is 5 million recurring increase, and that will be added in 2023, and we will see that moving through the next years. Also to note, we had one-time funding given to us for affordable housing. In 2022, there was 5 million given at the mid-year budget cycle, and early in the fiscal year at the carryover budget review and the start of this fiscal year 2022, we were also given 5 million in one-time funding. So you can see there's 19.68 million for 2023 that's in our baseline, and that will be recurring into the future years. And then this 10 million addition to help with affordable housing. Next slide. This graphic gives you a perspective of our funds, and funds are important for housing because it basically it's important because the revenues that come into that fund are supposed to be spent specific to the purposes of the fund. So at this time, we have 10 funds, and we have been streamlining our funds in housing. We used to have close to 20 funds. We now have 10 funds. The revenues for the funds are 156.898 million, and you can see that the expenditures are 158,104,603. So we have 182 positions that we support throughout this fund structure. For the 182 positions that we do have, highlights are for 2023 that we are being given 5 positions in 2023, and that will help with affordable housing development. And we've also been given 1 position for a preservation coordinator, and that was given to us in 2022. Office to Prevent and End Homelessness is also part of housing. They were merged with us, and they have a budget of 18 million. And their position count of 23 merit positions remains flat with no increase in 2023. This slide gives you a perspective of our revenues, and it's important to look at what is the percentage of county support that we get. We have 31%, and you can see it in the pie chart. 31% of our funding comes from the county, and it comes to us in the Housing General Fund and the AHDI fund, which is what I just spoke of in the previous slide, which is the .5 cent, the recurring 5 million, and then any one-time money. So that's the county support you see in the 31% in the blue. We also have a substantial amount of grant funding, and then we have our housing programs that bring in revenue. So this is just the breakout of our revenue support. This breaks it down even further, and it's good to exemplify what we actually get in our grant funding. So you can see in the green, the federal state funding and our grant funding that we get is 88.4 million. It's 57% of the revenues in housing that we get. And then for general fund support, you can see the pie chart in the lighter blue, that's the general fund support we get. And then the yellow shows you the .5 penny and the one-time recurring money that we get for affordable housing development. Next slide. This slide gives you a perspective of the county contribution. And we look at this every year because it's important to see how much support are we given from the county for affordable housing and what we need to support the population that we're serving. So you can see a big jump from 2020 to 2021. 23 million of that jump is due to Office to Prevent and End Homelessness merging with housing. So that's that increase. But you can see that from 21 to 23, that bar is shifting up, and we have been successful in getting more money and funding from the county for affordable housing purposes. Next slide. So where do the expenditures go? Expenditures are 156.2 million. Operating expenses are 107 million. You can see in the purple, development and capital expenditures are 21.4, and that pie has been increasing over the past several years and will continue to grow as we continue to get more money for affordable housing development. Personnel is a large portion of our funding as well. We have to support the positions within housing, and within our structure of grants and the revenue that we receive, which is restricted in the growth that we have for our rental programs and our properties and what we can bring in. We have to continue to support the pay increases of our personnel as well as fringe benefits, which has a large impact in supporting the costs. Next slide. What are the challenges for 2023? We do have a substantial amount of debt and balloon payments coming over the next several years. And that would be several $1 million that we have to plan for within our reserves to make those payments. We have an ongoing need of financing for development projects. That will also mean that we have bonds that we may need for our projects. We also need to build capital reserves across our funds. And that has been a priority for us over the last several years and will continue over the next several years to continue to maintain some type of capital reserve for the needs that we have. Our challenge is also that we have difficulty increasing our revenues to support our programs. So our rents that we get in our programs, they're restricted due to the population that we serve. We can't just increase rents. And often with the difficulties of the pandemic and other situations happening, that becomes more difficult in the current year as well as next year. Also, real estate taxes for condominiums are up 4%. That does impact affordability and ownership of rent. And for the population that we are serving and hoping that they do get ownership of property eventually. We continue to address the challenges of homelessness. We will continue the challenge of the One Fairfax County perspective in housing. We have the challenge of meeting the Board of Supervisor goals of 5,000 affordable housing units over the next 15 years. We continue to have aging infrastructure and maintenance needs because not only do we need to build new affordable units, but we also have our own units that we have under our present umbrella that we need to maintain the capital, the infrastructure, renovation needs, maintenance needs of the properties that we have. The countywide real estate and property value assessments are increasing. That impacts affordability. That is a challenge. Rising inflation coupled with potential interest rate increases will also be a challenge. Next slide. And this lays out the schedule and timeline, which is important for advocacy or support for affordable housing. The county executive did make his presentation on February 22nd. He will be coming to the Housing FCRHA board meeting on March 31st. We have public hearings on the county 2023 budget and the 2022 third quarter, and that will be occurring on April 12th through the 14th. Markup is April 26th. The County Board of Supervisors adopts the budget on May 10th. The FCRHA formally adopts the budget on May 19th, and the county executive comes to speak to us at the FCRHA board also in May. And then we start the new fiscal year for 2023 on July 1st, 2022. And that wraps up the presentation and highlights for the budget. And if there's any questions, I can answer those.
Thank you so much, Seema. Really appreciate that overview. And I'm certain that there may be some questions. Before we open it up, Tom, do you have anything that you want to add just with regard to AHAC's mission and the upcoming, how we might be involved? And then I'll open it up.
Certainly. And again, Seema, thank you very much for that always excellent presentation. Really appreciate it. What I can say is that, you know, there's a lot to digest here, I know, but, you know, clearly, as you'll see in the work plan going forward, as part of our next discussion, you know, that one of the roles for AHAC is to provide advice to the board relative to the budget for housing, and certainly I think there are opportunities here to do that. There's been a lot of progress made thanks to the board's willingness and commitment to this issue, and to the continued advocacy of people, you know, mainly of the people who are in this meeting. But we're certainly happy to answer any questions as well.
Okay, great. So I see if you'll, and yeah, do raise your hand, Jerry Poggi, then Ken, and I'll keep looking. Jerry?
Yeah, thank you so much. And Seema, thanks so much for trying to distill a very complicated budget. I think of our strategy for education and public engagement, and boy, do we have to work with you to make people realize how complex the county's support for affordable homes for all actually is and how many different sources. I have to profess, I was terribly disappointed in Brian Hill's leadership. In his presentation of the budget, it really is a very low bar for county revenue support to the system. On Monday, I was at a breakfast where Supervisor Alcorn was present, and I pointed out to him that our absolute need is 45,000 affordable units before the pandemic impact and before the Afghan refugee impact. So we're kind of in a lowball of needing 45,000, and our goal is 5 by 15 years, 2034. And I posited to Supervisor Alcorn, we really need to set a doubling of that rate, 10,000 by 2034. He said, yes, I'd support that. So I'm thinking we're in a realm where perhaps we could stretch our goals and push our goals. And, I'd want everybody on AHAC to feel the enthusiasm for building political will to give Tom, you and Seema and your staff the resources necessary to accelerate the good work that we've gotten done. We have to support the good work so far, but we can't accept meager propositions. And I look at the $5 million that goes into recurring, that's only a sixth of a penny's worth of more permanent investment in affordable housing. And so we need to get every effort underway to promote dedicated funding resources, which will be another key to our strategic efforts. But I only want to thank you for laying it out, for all the good work that you and your team have done. But I can only say I'm chomping at the bit to push for a greater effort in 2022.
Thank you, Jerry. Ken, you were next, and then I'll open it up. Ken, and you are muted, I think. Nope, you're good.
Am I good now?
You're great.
Okay, I'm just wondering, I'm not the greatest person when it comes to dealing with money and everything like that, or statistics and so forth. But I'm trying to remember, when did we start having the 5,000 properties or whatever needed? And I'm pretty sure it was way before the pandemic started. And now here we are again talking about 5,000 units. Surely, after we've had 2.5 years of pandemic, that number has changed. And why are we sticking to that? And then there's the $15,000 or whatever, that we seem to be hung up. I mean, I'd like to think that we have gotten a little bit further in our numbers, and we're keeping up with things as they change. I mean, yesterday it rained, so forth and so on. So today we have a clear sky. There's no way possible we can germane or put together everything that happened yesterday and use it for what is going on today. And is Brian really that forgetful?
Thank you, Ken. And yes, you're referring to the goals that came out of the Affordable Housing Resource Panel that was pre-COVID, and that as part of our work plan, and I think going forward, monitoring how we're doing, one, against that goal, but also to Jerry's point about whether we need to push that goal and continue to assess the housing need. We know that's going on in various jurisdictions as they're looking at plans. Tom, I don't know if is there anybody else who wanted to comment on that? And I will say that what we're hearing specific to the budget, this is obviously the opportunity and time. And when I know you studiously reviewed the draft work plan, where we review it, we get to provide feedback and take our feedback to the board now, and through the tax rate hearing, all the moments that Seema laid out in terms of the timeline. So this is great. Anybody else comments or questions? Yes, Dave Levine.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Seema. Very good presentation. I just had a question on the ARPA money coming to DHCD. It's 30 million, you said. What exactly is that going to be spent on? Is that all rent relief, or what other functions could there be with or activities with that money?
So that $30 million is intended specifically for capital purposes. What I can say though about it, because of the vagaries of how the actual act was written and kind of the guidance that we have gotten, is that it can't be used in the form of a loan, which, as you know, is sort of the main vehicle of how we do our affordable housing financing. So as a result, what we have needed to use it for and what we're planning to use it for is to go into our deals for the purpose of land acquisition.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Great. Great, thank you. Mary, sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to follow the increase in the budget. I see that it went up a little bit by the bar graphs, but a couple years ago when we were having some big events around getting more money for affordable housing, we were looking at an equivalent. I never like calling things pennies on taxes because that's kind of negative to most people, but we were looking at the equivalent of at least a penny and a half. We were trying to raise it by half a penny back to its old original stand, and then I think raised another half penny. This was back in the election year, and then the preservation committee recommended a fourth half penny, which would bring it up to 2 pennies. And that was what people were considering was kind of needed, but we're not up to 2 pennies, even with all the different sources of income. I see other sources coming in from federal areas, and that's fine because that's available. But we also need a dedicated stream of funding for affordable housing production, because we won't always have these federal grants that came in because of COVID. And I think our problem is growing. I'm very concerned that all of the market rate affordable housing, the 9,500 units, may not be as affordable as they were when we surveyed them, with the rents and the property values going up and the development happening. And I think we really need to reassess those and add that to our preservation goal. So I don't feel like this is a real big effort by the Board of Supervisors to increase affordable housing and give it a permanent stream of income. I understand all the different things that have been done and the land donations and et cetera, but I'd like to see a commitment of a funding stream that's going to grow in tandem with the growing need.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. And we're hearing a theme, at least here. Anyone else want to comment on that? And we will be taking this and formulating our own recommendations. Mr. Kennedy, yes.
Okay, there we are. I'd like to go back to some of the basics. My understanding is that what the budget so far as presented is the executive's idea of how to spread all the money, right? I assume there's no holdback that can be used to add in certain places or others. And I guess that leads to the point that is any new increase have to come from someone that already has a commitment for the 23 budget? Or does it, and I should say, it would require a penny increase in the rate. And the points that have been made, I think, so far, the argument that Mary did a nice job summarizing is that going into the pandemic, there was a strong commitment for at least 1.5 pennies. And I'd like to have some context comments. Obviously, we want more money, but I think it's important that we know how we're going to have to go after it. Thank you.
I see Joe, and then I'll perhaps bring it back to Tom to comment. Thanks, Joe.
If it's okay, maybe I'll comment too on that, just from sort of
Good.
a historical perspective, but also I think what is included in the budget, in addition to everything that Seema laid out, sort of the punchline of the county executive's budget was that there is a balance available. So Mr. Kennedy, to your point, it wasn't all allocated. There is a balance available, about $79 million. And the conversation on Tuesday revolved, I think, primarily around the fact that because almost entirely that balance is as a result of increased real estate tax to be paid by residential homeowners. That's where the conversation was going to go over the course of the next couple of months in terms of how to mitigate that to some extent, because clearly, as we've talked about before, that's an element of affordability. Increases for residential assessments are going up about 10% this year. The average, and we know from past conversations, the average is meaningless to most of us, but it is a number to sort of put a hook in, is almost $670 per homeowner. And so I think that the reality of the conversation the board will have is about that impact, what to do with that balance. The flip side of it, though, obviously, is where we need to come at it from is it more important? Is the priority relative to affordable housing and the provision of units for those who don't have, even the benefit of a home right now to get it, and whether some of that money could be added to the recurring resources committed to affordable housing. The 5 million increase, I would agree, is a small one in the grand scheme of things. But I think our conversation, in addition to, I agree completely with Mary's point about looking at across the board at the numbers, also perhaps looking ahead to reassessing what the target should be. I mean, the target, as has been said, is a little old now, and certainly we've made a lot of progress, and that's very positive. And so the combination of the number always moving, the progress we've made, I think naturally leads one to need to talk anew about what the target should be. That increases the commitment need. And so I think it adds some more pressure on the specific advocacy we need to do relative to what additional recurring money could be wrestled out of this year's process. I'll just say one more thing, and that's back to something I said the last time, which is, not taking away at all from the need for that advocacy and understanding fully that recurring funding is much more valuable in the long run than the one-time funding. The one-time funding is what's largely gotten us the progress that we've made so far. The ability to get $30 million in federal money for Land Act, the ability to get the additional 10 in general fund dollars for anything within the parameters of affordable housing development and preservation is huge. And I think that part of our messaging needs to be complete appreciation for that, continued advocacy for that, and but by the way, it's also important to do the baseline wherever we can as well.
Joe, thank you so much. I think you wrapped everybody's comments and sort of a strategy moving forward very well. I'm getting the hook from my staff counterparts to keep us on time, but I wanted to see if Tom wanted to add anything, but Dick, I did see your hand, and you are muted.
Yes, I'll be very quick. My sense is that our federal budget is not fixed at all yet, and I assume that our budget, the county budget that expects it, is based on last year for now. I hope even without the big bang that President Biden had proposed, that doesn't seem to be going anywhere quick. But I think there is some more money, I hope, in the regular debate that's probably all gone through, and it's just a matter of, we were supposed to get it in October, and obviously that didn't happen. And but that's typical at the federal level. And but I think the amounts that are being talked about are larger, and that's a good thing for us to keep in mind and plan wise. But it doesn't get us the county money that which is the issue at hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tom Fleetwood, I don't see you on my screen. Did you want to say anything? Otherwise, I don't see Tom.
Sorry, Carrie, I was just going to say Mr. Poggi has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not getting the full screen. I don't see you. Jerry, go ahead. And then we'll.
I'm sorry, just a quick response to Dick's cogent comment, and we're ever thankful that Joe is with us in building better budgets. And, we want to build a good team. But check out slide 12 on Brian Hill's budget presentation, and it talks about the equalization rate for apartments. So I'm lucky enough to own my own home and paid off a 30-year mortgage. But so many of our lower middle income residents live in apartments. And when their equalization rate almost triples, we need to understand as an AHAC the pressure on those living in apartments whose rates are going to increase dramatically. And that is a quintessential question of affordability and ultimately accessibility that I think should frame our next conversation, which is our strategic planning exercise.
Exactly. And Jerry, thank you for that. I'm going to welcome Molly Benzinger-Lacey has joined the call. Molly, could you state where you are calling from for the record? Ask you to unmute. I did see you. We'll come back.
Yes, I'm calling from Burke, Virginia.
Fabulous. Thank you. Welcome. So I think this is all really critical. One of the things, as you all know, that we're going to be moving to take these comments and wrap it into the advice and recommendations that we're going to take now, the Board of Supervisors, and certainly to have input. But part of that conversation also, we thought it would be helpful to, just in terms of the instability that our most vulnerable neighbors and lower and middle income neighbors are feeling in the wake of all of this. We wanted to ask Tom Barnett to give a brief update on the work of the continuum of care and the point in time information that's going to be critical to shaping our work plan and our budget requests for the future. So Tom, I'm going to ask you to give us that update. And I want to thank John Boylan had requested that we have an update on this before we get into the work plan.
All right. Thank you, Carrie, very much. I'll give a few brief updates. First of all, the Continuum of Care Committee of this AHAC is going to be meeting again next Friday, March 4th at 2 p.m. at the Government Center, rooms 9 and 11. I'm sorry, 9 and 10. At this meeting it'll be an important one because we'll be electing the officers, both the chair and vice chair of this committee. We're also going to be introducing, so the beginning of renewing our strategic planning efforts, as well as gaps analysis, which is required by the federal regulations, and have some discussion about our ongoing racial equity systems analysis with other continuums of care in the DC region. Now, if you didn't catch that information on the meeting, Judith will be sharing the details after today's AHAC meeting via email, including minutes from the COC committee's last meeting, which was back in October. We had, like AHAC, originally planned to meet in early, I think it was January, but with the Omicron surge, we thought it best to defer the meeting until, well, next week. But January was also an important time for us because, as you know, if you've been paying attention to homelessness, that is the time that we do our annual point in time count. And this isn't just Fairfax County, but it's communities across the country, all doing it around the same time. Ours was Wednesday, January 26th. We do not have the results yet. It typically takes several weeks and actually months of coordination, planning, analysis, and we publish the results in partnership with the other continuums of care in the DC region and through the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. So I think it's really notable that we were able to accomplish a point in time this year. Many COCs across the country tried not to do point in times, or deferred unsheltered counts. We did the same count that we have done every year for many years, and that's thanks in large part to our many partners and service providers, including many of you in this room. And it was especially difficult this year because of that Omicron surge, which had a real significant impact on staffing as well as the people that we serve. I'll just add one additional point related to the county executive's proposed budget. It does include $386,000 to support the Artemis House domestic violence shelter, of which the Department of Housing and Community Development assumed responsibility for last fiscal year, and we've been making significant improvements to the facilities and services. And the proposed budget also includes a 2% contract rate increase for providers primarily of homeless services. So that's the equivalent of $295,000 approximately. So there's a lot of other things happening around homelessness right now. I encourage you to join us for the Continuum of Care Committee, if not for this next one, but for future ones. And later in this year, we'll be having special dedicated conversations around homelessness as part of this work plan, which we will discuss in just a few minutes. So I thank you for the time, Carrie.
Thank
Let
you,
me know if you
Tom.
have any questions.
Thank you, Tom. And I just want to acknowledge, for those of us who work in homeless services, the incredible support from the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness, and let you know that with the quarantine hotels that have, I think 7 hotels that were stood up in addition to normal work, that we were collectively, Fairfax County and its partners, able to house more than 700 households who were experiencing homelessness prior to entering the hotel system, in addition to work. So there's been a lot of progress made, largely due to some of the influx, but like everyone, we are waiting to see what happens as things settle down and evictions pick up. But it's really important, and it's a critical piece of AHAC's work in our charge to understand that context. And so we appreciate putting us there. We are mostly on time. This is going to be, unless there were any questions for Tom about his update, we are planning again to ask the COC, the elected chair and members, to work with Tom and Jamie and bring us a more deeper dive once the homeless numbers are out and sort of what we can expect, and tying that to the needs for, rental assistance strategy, services, and other things. So we'll bring that up on another agenda. I'm going to shift us now to the work plan that we sent to you all, tried to capture. I think hopefully you will see this working living document is one that we tried to set up to really capture the strategy areas that we have been charged to this council has been charged with. And so again, this will be a working document. It's the first time we've taken some of the recommendations, and Judith is going to bring that up and we're going to walk through it. But we organized this so that you could see in the areas of production and preservation, let's thank you for bringing it up on the screen, the legislation and policy and some of those other areas. Where can we make a difference? What is our role? And as we define our role and sort of the specifics that we need and start to put all of this into action, because we've been very much in a learning and collecting mode, and now we're starting to shift to action. We wanted to make sure that we understood what was where we need information and input from staff, HCD staff or others, and where we're going to need and where AHEC's role aligns. So that's how we set that up. I think we did try to define some of the questions, set some timeline and priorities areas, and borrowed from some other plans, which really use a context of sort of very near term. What can we do now? What is ready for action? Where can we weigh in over the next year? What are those areas that are being undertaken that we need more information or that may take 1 or 2 years to complete, sort of those transitional ideas? And then the things that are more transformational. I'm seeing that close to home in Hunter Mill, where the Reston Master Comprehensive Plan, the review of that plan is looking at equity in zoning principles, similar to something that Supervisor Lusk introduced. And what are those things that have been identified that will lead to the transformation of the system, everything that we heard from many of you earlier today. So that is the how we put this plan together. What you can see are, again, the strategy areas up above. You know how those are defined. And what I want to do is, and then the 2 goals that we have been assigned under each strategy area, but under production and preservation in particular, noting to Ken's point earlier, and several of you, that our original goal was for the minimum 5,000 new homes, and then preservation task force, which just presented, I think it was last year, I'm losing time, what those goals would be. And we do know that that is something that we may need to add to continue to review those targets and information. So I'd like to spend the next, I think maybe 30, 40 minutes walking through this plan, and just walking through the chart. And I think the first question we want to know from each of you is really sort of asking you, do the items listed and what is the role of staff versus AHAC? Do these roles and the priorities make sense? Is there anything missing, just in terms of sort of what we should be looking at? Any questions, any issues from AHAC's role that we're missing, or that would should be changed to more accurately capture our understanding of AHAC's role? And then the second thing that we're going to do is where there are areas for near-term action, and particularly we just heard about it in the budget. Let's talk about some action items that we might be able to move forward immediately, consensus on our plan. So with that, I'm going to, if that's okay, that's what we're going to do. And you see here the first goal of the Community Housing Strategic Plan. Our goal is to monitor, provide guidance and oversight on the recommendations that came out of the phase 1 work. There were 25 policy recommendations grouped in the areas that you see: modernization, land use and zoning. And I note that Julie Strandley put a note in the chat about the next Planning Commission meeting where some of these items are being discussed. And then after the staff review, our proposal is that AHAC's role would be to assist staff in determining where we're going from here. Are there any things that are completed that we've had success, or are there other things that need to be modified? The second piece of this item was about the Plan 2 recommendations, and we've just had a conversation about that. Advice regarding the funding, the goals, and budgetary and policy guidance. And these were the goals that we had laid out. This is obviously has some near term as well as some longer term. I'm going to go through this first area and then bring it back to comments. If you could move down, Judith. Another item, one of the recommendations regarding future the capital needs facilities and bond referendum. Again, HCD staff have to present ideas and information. Their role is to provide the ideas for the community facilities. And our role is to, again, assess this, provide guidance and response. And some of the areas that we had identified that have come out of some of our reports, the Housing Strategic Plan Phase 2, the ARP documents, as well as planning, again, co-location development of properties. So when new facilities are coming up, how can we co-locate housing and other? And then I referenced earlier, the rest and comp plan study is coming forward with an opportunity to look at a shelter and affordable housing in that study. And those are examples of the type of work that we could comment on. So I'm going to stop there on production before we move on to some of the preservation goals. Judith, if you could go back up and just open it up. I see Jerry Poggi. So again, I'd like to know first, are there things we're missing? Do these make sense in terms of AHAC's role? Items that we're missing in terms of an action item, and then we'll move to specific action. Go ahead, Jerry.
So Carrie, thanks so much. I really like the 4 strategic elements, and I'd love for us to think that maybe even the expanded AHAC is insufficient in terms of expertise to help drive all of these forward. And we should be thinking, could we expand for each strategic element additional expertise that might help us drive the process forward? I also want us to kind of think collectively as AHAC members that while we might prefer to work in one particular strategic area and lend our expertise, I think collectively we all hold responsibilities for each of the 4 strategic areas. So I should be doing, I'm going to argue shortly to double the goal to 10,000 affordable homes, but that's the strategy 1 area. But I want to play a role in helping to educate the community about that. And I want to play a role in making sure that equity is well served within that. So as a bigger framework question, I would urge you to think about in our next iteration of this conversation, how do we assemble ourselves better to more effectively meet the challenge? But back to strategy 1, I really think that we would have a fundamentally different attitude about strategy 1 if we all embraced the need for us to double the goal from 5,000 to 10,000. It would change the dynamic on how urgently we would see to pursue each of the elements that have been so effectively listed by you and Tom and Judith and the staff. I think it's a wonderful layout, but I think it needs to be considered if we had a slight paradigm shift, moving from 5 to 10, what would that mean for us to accelerate production on each of these efforts? And even to the question of how often should we consider shifting towards the ultimate goal of 45,000 plus. We want to build capacity on Tom and his HCD team. We want to build public capacity for saying this is the best thing we should be doing as a community. And that requires thoughtfulness on everybody's part about how to make that work well. Yeah. So, I really like the structure. I like all of the elements that have been laid out, but I'd only ask that we answer the hard question. If we were going to double in the near term, how would we change our thinking to accelerate what is already on paper? Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jerry. I mean, I think you captured it to the first point. We really struggled with laying this out because you can't move forward a goal without having our role of community education and enhancement. But you will see that second to last column is a place where we're referencing that there might be simultaneous action going on. So your proposal here on if we agree to shift the paradigm and pick up the again beyond the minimum, the floor that's been established, there's education, there's budget opportunities and all of those things, and they will then have to be linked together. This was for us to start to categorize a lot of what we've been hearing from you since last July when the council was convened. And so what we have, and I want to get through this before we go to action. The board has adopted and established that minimum goal. But I think it will be for us to consider, but I think we're going to need some more information and time to really talk about what that could be before I would entertain a motion to move that forward. And I'd love to make sure that we have staff input. So along those lines, the next set of, but I've captured it, Jerry. The next set of recommendations just get into on the work plan that Judith was taking us through. And I couldn't see it online. That's why I was peering. I now have my copy in front of me, but we're around the preservation. Yes.
Carrie, I'm sorry. I have my virtual hand up and my real hand up.
I'm sorry. I can't
That's
see.
okay. I understand. Jennifer Adeli, I just wanted to, it's both a question and a comment. And I wanted to raise the subject about converting properties to housing. Because I don't see where that fits in the preservation and production construct that we have laid out. And given the post-pandemic, and really frankly, even before the pandemic, we had quite a lot of commercial properties that were vacant. And we know that for the last couple of years, vacancy rates of commercial are increasing, and every business forecast that is out there is predicting that commercial property vacancies are only going to grow even when we come to a post-pandemic new norm. And I think that we would be remiss if we didn't identify that as a specific channel that we need to be pursuing to convert. And it's going to be a combination of working with developers and owners of those commercial properties, as well as zoning and land use, because it's going to be zoned as commercial and we'd be looking for residential and so on. But I don't think it fits cleanly because it is preserving, right? In some ways, it may be preserving a commercial business, low-rise property, 2 or 3 stories. I can picture all of them that were built in the 1970s around Tyson's Corner that, are currently zoned commercial. They are privately owned, and there's a preservation aspect because we may be working with those owners to prevent those from being torn down and a high rise being built in their place. Or it could also count as production, where we're essentially creating new units where none existed previously. So I just wanted to throw that out as both a question and a comment.
I'm going to let Tom speak to that. That was indeed one of the goals that was among the phase 1, the first 25 strategies. So, but I hear you and feel you that we may need to pull that out specifically. Tom, do you want to comment in addition?
Sure. A couple things on that. Number one is, it is indeed in the phase 1 recommendations to my recollection. And number one, number two, I really look at it as being part of new production because it is creating new residential out of something that had been a separate, a different use. That being said, I am concerned about, how should I put this, about seeing the conversion of commercial properties as being a large part of the solution necessarily. And the reason I say that is because of the cost for an affordable product to do a conversion. I think in some cases it can work. In some cases, perhaps a strategy of acquiring the land and scraping it and doing something completely new might be what we need to do. But certainly points well taken.
Hey, Carrie,
Please go ahead.
it's Michelle. I'm sorry, I
Thank you.
know it's really hard
I
to
can't see with the document up. I apologize. So y'all just jump in.
I have a process question. On this very first item of the, looking at the strategies in phase 1 of the strategic plan, I specifically remember that the board asked staff to provide kind of quarterly updates and monitoring of where we are in achieving the goals of those strategies that were laid out. There was also a timeline for those goals. The other thing I want to bring up is in 2017, the county did really kind of an extensive study. They had a task force looking at the conversion of commercial properties into residential. So my point in raising all this is to say, what else is there out there that has already been done that we should be building upon and looking at? So I would be interested to know, Tom, I don't know if with the pandemic and everything else, if you have been able to even create those updates on the progress of the phase 1 strategies. But I think that was a process that was in place. That was a timeline that was in place. And I think quite a few of those have already been accomplished. So we don't need to go back probably and reinvent the wheel. We should be picking up from what the last progress was on that.
And Michelle, thank you. That's exactly why I put this on the work plan, is because I think we to catch up to that and to see what's already been done, what's new. So that's exactly why this is here, because with the advent of the pandemic and everything else, while a lot has been happening, we wanted to give the staff an opportunity to brief us, to incorporate. We know the preservation task force has met since, all of those things, many of those have been done, and just to give them a chance to lay that out for us so that we could then say, okay, let's focus on this.
Okay, it wasn't clear to me that we weren't just starting all over again. So that's great that we're going to begin.
I'm sorry, that's what was intended.
Great, thank you.
And Tom, I didn't mean if you wanted to comment, but I think that's exactly the right point, Michelle. So again, this is the first time you're seeing the work plan, and this is very helpful to us to hear some of the things that we need to comment on. And this is, I know, still a little process, but it gives the foundation for us and perhaps an executive committee to begin to move some of these items forward to action. Again, we
Mary, this is Gwen Minton.
I'm sorry, Gwen. I can't
if
see.
I could ask a question. Under the column responsible assigned, you list standing committee and question mark, and you do that a couple of times for the different items. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So one of the things, I think Jerry alluded to it earlier about expertise, and we've talked about the incredible group of people here and our staff, and how could we ensure that we had time as a committee to go through this. So we're trying to look at the logistics of how we might explore some of these issues. And so AHEC's bylaws do allow us to appoint a standing committee. We've been doing this as a committee of the whole. It would be advertised that way anyways, but perhaps giving us some time to focus on a specific initiative. So if we just take this one, the update Michelle mentioned, if staff bring us an update of the phase 1, what's currently in play, then perhaps a smaller group respond to that, bring something to AHAC to be able to respond to. There's 3 items here that we want to elevate to the next level. So a lot of this is just a question of how we're going to operate within FOIA, and frankly, the time of our staff, which is pretty stretched. So what I'm learning as the chair of a BAC is that, we've got to publicize. We certainly want the public to be part of this, but it's harder to get things moving in between our meetings.
The idea is that the standing committees would meet.
If we need that, or if we just focus on something and people who can come and have that expertise will help define and bring that back to the committee in between. Some of this may come straight to the committee, we vote on it and go forward.
Okay.
So thank you for your patience, as this is really just a first draft and process to action. We're all impatient to that, but trying to get it on paper.
Carrie, I want to make one comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm grateful for you listing all this stuff out, and I was on all these things from the beginning of where you're starting, not from the beginning of where a lot of other people started. But in the last several years, I see a big change kind of going on in two areas that we might want to incorporate into this. One is that there's been more experience with some of these different techniques and zoning and policies and whatnot that have been listed earlier on by some of our experts in the 25 items, and not here necessarily, but also in other places, in other jurisdictions that we should take a look at. And two is that I think there's been an attitudinal shift since maybe the summer of 2020. There's more of an equity element and an involvement of people concerned in terms of looking at affordable housing and planning for development, new development, and having equity as an element there and involvement. And that lens, I think, needs to be applied to what we've done previously, because it wasn't there initially during the phase 1 and phase 2 items.
Mary, thank you so much. And you will note, after each meeting, we have shared some documents or examples that you all have brought to the committee's attention. On page, well, I'm looking at the 8.5 by 11 version, but on one page under the strategy area for education engagement, for example, there is a reference to the Dr. Wolf's study in terms of disproportionality. And then there's another study that was done. I think there's a reference to a shift in sort of housing equity. That is it the deeply rooted. I'm not seeing it now. Judith is going to help me. We were out the housing and health. I call you attention to this, and that link should be live, but that's a great example of some resources and thinking that may prompt us, in addition to what we all know from the chairman's task force, from Carla Bruce's presentation, and from the great work that you and others have done. So we need to continue to bring that in. I think some of those things are going to be transformational, but as we've seen, how do we bring that in? Michelle led a sign-on campaign recently about engaging equity principles in a community conversation that I think was really helpful and called us to that reminder.
Yeah, I think this is a transformational item, really, because it's looking at what people on the ground and who are experiencing these issues think would help. And I think, help achieve more affordable housing. They may not know all the technical techniques and land use issues, but I think their opinions and their voices are really crucial to solving this problem. And that what we need to do is work on policies. For example, South County Task Force has asked the Planning Commission to come up with a policy that will involve mobile homeowners and tenants in land use planning decisions and rezoning decisions of property near them. State law requires only property owners be notified, but I think including and involving people who are lower income and not property owning, and doing that in a very intentional way through One Fairfax techniques will bring out some new ideas and some new policies that we may need to pursue.
I agree. And it's going to be the how of that, the when of that, and some of that. And we have captured that general goal under the strategy 4, but it needs to be spelled out. And I think that's where we need to go next.
Carrie?
Yes, please.
Real quickly, you know, I like where we're going with this, but one thing I want to think, I'm usually the person who thinks outside of the box. So everything that we were saying here is great. The only issue that I have is based on what happened with the George Mason development. One of the things that we already know, we have a great deal of people who are not into all of this. You call them NIMBY or whatever. But I think one of the things that we have not done clearly is to educate people why the need is there first, and then have the open conversations on the do's, the whys, the won'ts, the will not, you know, so forth and so on. We don't go out and educate. It seems like we're throwing things out there, and we haven't given a great enough attention to how we're doing this, or more importantly, why we're doing this. And I think if we did that, we could circumvent a lot of the rigmarole of people being against it. And once they realize it, actually after this pandemic, we have even more fuel to add to the fire, because this has put the whole country in a role where we're shortcutting everything. So it doesn't just exist here; it exists the entire country, from the California side all the way from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, from the north to the south. So if we do that, I think that would alleviate some of our issues. Not all of them. There are always going to be people who are going to be against this, but at least we can educate people and get more of a YIMBYism kind of attitude with people once they realize that we're doing something to help everybody, lift everybody up. And I think that's all I got for today, hopefully.
Thanks, Ken. Exactly right. And part of our strategy and role here has to be thinking not just what AHAC can do as a body and what our role is to, help the board move forward these goals, but I think some of the outreach and the advocacy groups that are also taking those messages back. And I was on a call yesterday where business leaders and developers and others were offering, bringing the same voice that you and others will bring. And they were joined by community members, and it was very effective to hear it coming from different parties. At the risk of, I'm rushing us through there, but you are bringing out things we need to build into this work plan. I think the preservation and production strategies, we're going to, we know what particularly preservation was more recent. There's certainly, Mary just brought up some of the work that's being done with the manufactured housing task force, and we need to understand that more, and certainly what AHAC's role can be in promoting that. As we get into the legislation, really the comments on legislation, policy, and budget, because there's a lot of energy and certainly very near-term priority to this. I want to just, again, take you back to what the staff have done, and we really appreciate, again, Seema does a fabulous job. If you didn't see that presentation is being sent to us, so that we can have this and build that into our repertoire. We're going to review and then see our role to review it, provide feedback, and draft the advocacy plan, and the need to testify before the board and bring any issues. So these are just guidance. We heard also we have to understand the context of the federal state budget resources and how we use that. I heard Joe and many people offer some wonderfully articulated messaging for what might go into AHAC's commentary, which we would want to bring back to you all. What else on legislation, policy, and budget? And some of the policy issues are going to continue to emerge. Might I hear comment on now, just on this section? Get a chance to look through it.
Carrie, Julie's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Julie.
Hi, thank you. I just want to go back a little bit to the comments about the Planning Commission and public outreach and community involvement. So many of you may or may not know that we have been working, which started with the school situation, to make sure that the community was included in comments on school renovations. And we've made a great deal of progress on that. And as part of that process, I developed a best practices document that relates to schools on making sure that all of the community is communicated with and involved in the process. As I was doing that, I had a conversation with Carla Bruce, who's the Chief Equity Officer for Fairfax County, and she and I had a great conversation. And you may not be aware that in October, she presented to the Board of Supervisors on the importance of equitable outreach as conforming to One Fairfax. And at the Planning Commission, we had this conversation. Several of us have been leading this conversation to make sure that outreach is done equitably. And one of the things that came up that schools was overlooking, and that also came up with the Route 1 project that Mary's familiar with, is that homeowners have been the ones who have been contacted. For example, civic associations, homeowners associations have been on the list to be contacted. And as part of the conversation, realizing what was happening at Falls Church High School with the renovation, there are a tremendous amount of rental properties in that area that are not being consulted, and those families are long-term renters. So as part of that process, we are very consciously making sure that the entire community is involved in the process, not just homeowners. And through that process, faith-based initiatives can be part of that. Many of the, in Falls Church in particular, the rental properties are behind Knox Presbyterian Church. And I know families who live there, and many of them attend that church. So we are very consciously looking to make sure that we are reaching out to everyone. So I hope that's helpful. To Mary's point, I think it's the board who will be looking at that. But we have made, and I'm working with schools to make sure that when they do their outreach, just like any other applicant, including the county, that they are doing the requisite outreach and reaching all the parties. And then I just wanted to follow up on community and involvement. Absolutely. As Tom and everyone probably remembers, we had the Bailey's Crossroads Shelter several years ago, which was very challenging. And one of the things that we were able to do to gain community support for that was to make sure that outreach to the community was part of that, including establishing an advisory committee so that that group was doing the outreach and answering the questions and building community support. So absolutely agree with the last comments about making sure that the community knows what the project is, why it's important, so that that opposition is turned into support. So I appreciate your indulging me on that. I have to run to another meeting, that's why I may have to jump off, but thank you.
Julie, thank you. You've been such a wonderful advocate and example of housing in all places and taking this through. Have worked with you on those issues. Carla Bruce did indeed bring some of that the importance of that broad community engagement and those voices that aren't often heard to our meeting in December. And yours is a great reminder of how the Planning Commission schools have put it into work. And I think that's what we need to do here. And I see several places on our work plan where we can emphasize that and pull that in, and it hits the transformational and it hits the immediate, because we can do that now. Thank you. Great. And I'm so, and I know staff are helping me take notes. So on legislation, I wanted to, the second strategy area, are there things here again that we're missing, that like these ideas that we can pull out and start to turn into action items? We're going to add a column here. Any comments? And again, I'm trying to scroll, but please feel free to unmute and speak.
Yeah, this is Eleanor.
Eleanor.
I don't have a specific comment specific to that, but just in general, this is a great layout, by the way, so thank you very much. It was very clear to me reading it. I'm just wondering if there's any place here to add the resources that are needed for each of these things, because as a work plan, if we're working towards something, we've identified these goals, it'd be helpful to know, what we're working with. For example, I'm seeing that they're estimating that you need about $1.6 billion if you want to generate 20,000 units of affordable housing in Virginia. So if we're looking at, 5,000 or maybe 10,000 based on what somebody else said, do we have those resources, i.e., is it a realistic goal, or do we just have numbers on a piece of paper, which, makes it hard sometimes for people to get behind if it doesn't seem like it's realistic? And then the second observation for me is just in terms of, I think Michelle mentioned this, just in terms of those timelines for reviewing, and does that provide the opportunity to tweak our targets? So we have these targets and we have populations we've identified. Well, if the assessment that's done at the time that we review the plan is indicating that maybe the folks that we're targeting, maybe that's not where the need is as great as when we did it the last time, does the plan allow to tweak those so now you have revised, updated targets?
That's great. Thank you. And I will say that your point first about resources was why when Judith and I started, this was an 11 by 17 document to try and fit in the other columns that we know are going to need to be necessary, and apologies that we had forgotten to convert it back. So that's really critical. I think a really great point. And we're going to need to add that and identify, and it goes back to understanding the money that's available now and Joe's comments about first time use. And I think, thank you for affirming the need to review the targets and tweak them. And that question about whether we can, the board adopted a goal, but if it's our job to monitor and make recommendations, if data and needs have changed, then I think it would be our role to make recommendations as we move forward.
Gary, I have one thing on legislation of trying to follow housing legislation and promote it through several sessions. I think the people who are successful with legislation are people who have pretty strong coalitions and someone on the scene, on the spot, monitoring what's going on day to day, and being able to inform a wide set of people to chime in at certain points when they're needed to the legislators, or to testify at committees, or to do whatever's needed to push the legislation forward. And that's been, I've seen some groups do that really effectively, but I don't think housing quite has that all together. Yeah, there are some groups that do it, but there's kind of two avenues. There's one set of groups that tends to advocate for more money in the housing fund, and another set that advocates for more tenants' rights and eviction protection, and like the Virginia Poverty Law Center. And just getting the county to support certain legislation is very good. That's a very good step that we can do, but also getting other groups involved, I think, is crucial, because otherwise it just falls away. And I don't know that we can play a lead role in that we have the capacity for it, but we might try to at least have some early sessions with different groups and see if there's something we really, really want, if we can all band together and push for it somehow. I don't know, but that's what I see works.
Agreed, Mary. Go ahead.
I have a comment on strategy area 3. I like the recommendation around dealing with intersectionality.
We can't really hear you, Dr. Wolf. Are you able to turn your sound up a little bit?
Yeah, how about this? Can you hear me now?
It's still really hard to hear you.
Okay, I'll put my comment in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. If you put Yeah, can everybody see the chat, or we can read them out once they're in the chat? Okay, not
Sorry.
everybody can. So Carrie, if you can't read the chat, I can read them out for you.
Thank you, Steve. Sorry to make, I know this was going to be really good. Now we're making you type it into the chat. I think the intersectionality piece is we'll see this in a minute. Any other comments?
And
While
Carrie, Ken and Michelle have both had their hands up.
I'm sorry.
For a while.
I'm going to go to Michelle and then Ken.
I'm
I do
sorry,
not have a
Carrie,
hand
that
up. I
was,
forgot to take it down.
yeah, same with me.
Okay.
No, that was an earlier, sorry.
Thank you.
I want to hear from everybody else too.
All right. So I know, Steve, if you want to try again, or while you're going in, any other comments, Mary, we'll incorporate that. I think part of what we do, if we, again, getting out on in front of our agenda, we have provided input to the county's legislative agenda to the state. So AHAC has weighed in on that every year. But I think circling up, and of course that means this summer, and as soon as we get out of session with those organizations that you've identified at state level and getting that cross-section of opinion, we can certainly provide AHAC's information and what our priorities are, and certainly receive information there.
Carrie, this
Jerry
is
is
Jerry.
Jerry, go ahead.
So, I just want to express my deep frustration with WebEx as our platform. I was just cut off for perhaps 10 minutes, had to re-enter. So many people had trouble getting on today. I don't know how to find the chat function. It's so easy to do in the Zoom arena. I would really urge you and Tom and Judith to figure out, is this really the best system for us to be transparent to each other on these important conversations? But on this strategy 3 area, I want to amplify again, we've raised the importance of us connecting to the chairman's equity task force. And here's one area in which a leading member, the head of the Human Service Systems question, Amanda Angere, who, is a real leader within our community, she would be a terrific addition to our work within this area, because she doesn't suffer any fools gladly. And she really has concrete input as the leader of former leader of a nonprofit in our community on Cornerstone's leadership team. This is where we could build a much greater infrastructure if we brought other leaders into our orbit, if they were willing. And I'd love to help making them want to be willing. So I think we could do a lot stronger push in the coming couple of years if we recruit stronger from those who already have deeply formed opinions about how racial equity and our history of inequity on affordable homes for all is really a bedrock principle from which we need to atone, not just ask forgiveness, but to atone for the problems that confront us right now in Fairfax County.
Thank you, Jerry. And whether we bring those viewpoints and input in as educational part of our work to educate ourselves and then take those recommendations, or whether we follow the process defined by the bylaws and the charter for, appointing again, our participants, I think we have definitely talked about that need. We need new and voices at the table. I did want to recognize, if for those of you that can see the chat, and yes, on WebEx, I found it down in my right hand part of the screen finally. Thank you, Steve. The comment about strategy area 3 about intersectionality, if we can be more explicit, connecting the dots between those. And one of the references, in addition to all the great work and publication that Steve has done, including through Northern Virginia Health Foundation, there is a study that sort of pulled from all of that defines housing health as much broader than just affordability. It's the safety, it's your access to amenities in the community, it's your feeling of well-being and connectedness and all of those things. And I think it behooves us to really understand that, and we will begin to do that. Amanda and Deary, who does not suffer fools lightly, and I'm one of them, would be the first to tell us that we can't just build our way, as we all know, out of the affordable housing problem, and that it is this larger issue of justice and the transformation we are trying to exact. So,
Hey, Carrie.
Tom, sorry, yeah, I can see you.
Carrie, thanks. And just noting that we're at a little bit after 2:00 here, and we need to get through the rest of the draft that we have. I just want to note that the context of all of our work, particularly with respect to equity, but also the kind of policy context relative to the legislation, et cetera, all of this is all intended, aimed at, trying to produce more housing. And, I want to just kind of note here that, I would urge us to sort of to do, to keep investing the ideas and the connections we're making to the main focus here, which is, getting housing built and preserved. So, there's also, it's really important for me to note that for all of the things that we're working on here, we are at the department very stretched in terms of our staff resources. So, what we've tried to lay out here in partnership with Carrie is what we think we can accomplish, within the resources that we have from a personnel standpoint. So I just, I'm very excited about the energy that we have around this and all of the important ideas that we're going to be investing here. But I do want to just to strike a note of wanting to keep us focused, as AHAC and as, sort of the housing community, as it were, on the issues related to housing production and preservation. So thanks for that.
I want to comment on one thing Tom just said. I think it's important not just to build more housing, but to build housing that involves the people who need the housing. I think the very older way of building housing and sending people off to different parts of the country, wherever there was a county, wherever there was a vacancy, is maybe not the best way to build when communities are being changed and destroyed for development of other things, and that we really need to have sensitivity to what we build, where we build it, how we keep communities together, and how we take their input in changing their areas.
Couldn't agree more, Mary. And, and I say that in that, it's important to remember that we are operating here within the context of greater Fairfax County that also has a lot of other mechanisms and infrastructure to be able to help also further these issues.
Exactly. No, I think the planning and development and other departments are very much need to be involved in these processes.
Thank you. And I think, and thank you, Tom, for bringing us back. And I think that is an issue, but within that, and the reason we included as we move through some of the strategy areas is understanding the points that have been made about, particularly about intersectionality and equity, which is in our next section, and really trying to understand what we can do within our charge to produce and housing, and really understanding what those needs are. And so I think it is going to be a continuing, trying to keep us focused. Are we producing the units? Are the resources there? But also in how we do that and recognizing best practices. So we did start to put some of those recommendations in intersectionality, as we're calling it. And we are going to encourage some reading and thinking about, as we look at past practices, how we've done and if there's anything we can introduce to that. I think we've gone through the last section on communication and outreach needs to be defined and within the context of what we can do as a BAC. So we're going to take some thinking back. There are several of you I know who probably have burning comments or questions, want to move forward. I think I promised it's 2:15. We do know that the budget piece is critical and sort of understanding, shaping that. Are there folks who haven't had a chance to speak yet? And we will be tapping several of you to provide input into our statement and wrangling the recommendations. Again, harking back to what was said at the very beginning, some of the great questions to Tom. Any other comments from anybody on this plan areas who haven't had an opportunity? Can't. So, all right. So what we're going to do is take some of the comments back, perhaps bring it back in a different format and start to identify some of the specific actions. Oh, Michelle, sorry, didn't see you. Nope. Okay.
No, sorry.
Nope. It's just you popped.
Yeah,
you popped
sorry.
up on my screen.
No.
Okay. There are some definitely some great comments in the chat, and we'll capture that and make sure we get that out to you. The next piece of that, the next piece of our agenda, if there aren't specific comments, is what needs to happen between now and our next actual regular meeting of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee or Council, March 25th. So we're meeting a month from now. And one of the and where we will want to sort of finalize this plan and take some input. So there'll be some work going on, like Tom. There ain't much behind me in the way of capacity. And so we really need to figure out a way to absorb input from you all and make sure that we get your assistance in pulling this together. But we wanted to take the first stab at this. So we'll bring a more final living document to our next meeting, and certainly know that we need to finalize our budget recommendations, but won't be able to wait until then if we are to influence any of the conversation, the budget.
Carrie,
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's Michelle.
Yes.
Would it be helpful for us to, or for somebody to make a formal recommendation that we accept this draft document and continue to refine it? Is that?
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Okay, I so recommend.
Second.
Jerry, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, staff and Carrie and the team.
Thank you. Anybody's opposed? And thank you again. Thank you guys for your patience, but we're starting to lay it out. Thank you, Michelle. So some of the issues, and again, I'm capturing these budget messages that need to go into that limited staff capacity, some of what we've heard about. One of the questions about how and when we next meet, because this is not ideal, Jerry, I'd like to take WebEx off the table altogether, frankly, and resume meeting in person. One of the issues that has come up, I think most of us enjoyed the Providence Community Center, but it is only available to us between 12:30 and 2:30. Right now, our next meetings are scheduled for the traditional. We are looking, I think Malia is still looking for a place for us to meet at the Government Center from 9:30 to 11:30, which is our traditional meeting on those Fridays. If we want to pursue the Providence Community Center, it would have to be in the middle of the day. I don't know how to.
Do you have the location at 9:30 in Government Center? I think
We do.
have, yeah, I think we have the 9-10 rooms if they are so desired.
Okay, on March 25th.
Correct, Malia? I think she's messaging me. I'll confirm that, but I'm pretty sure it's reserved at least for March at 9:30 in rooms 9-10.
Okay. We had some challenges with the speaker system there. It is not as ideal, but it is what we can do as a BAC, and we hope people can participate physically. Is there a desire to try and move to later that day at Providence, which had a better speaker system, or can I move forward with the published time and date at the Government Center? All for Tom? Yeah.
No, I've always been able to get the speaker system to work when we had the CAB meetings there. I was their inside outside guy with my experience with communication. So I tell you what, since I'm clean and I got my test kits in the mail yesterday, I will proceed with that. I will say this real quickly, which had off topic. I got a message, an email, and a phone call from the county saying that I had not got my booster shot. How cool is that? That they reached out to me and found me to tell me, hey, you're slacking up. But so if we're going to meet at the Government Center, maybe I can get in there and see what I can do beforehand.
Thank you, Ken.
Up there.
Guess they were really needling you about it.
Yeah, I put the word is out on you. Haha, Tom, good one. All right.
Oh, nice, Tom. Nice.
I'm going to take this is 9:30. We're going to stay at the Government Center. I think we can consider the Providence maybe for if we're doing a working group meeting where we need to, spread out a little bit, but we'll move forward with that unless I hear anything else. So we know budget conversation, the work plan, it is part of what we said that we would ask staff to bring a dashboard, and we've just heard there's been some progress. We know there are a lot of things, but bring an updated dashboard of the production and preservation opportunities, all of which might inform our work plan. Is there anything else for the March 25th meeting that folks would like to put on the agenda?
So Carrie, the only thing I'll say is many of us serve in our capacity on AHAC as being a member of a board, authority, or commission or an organization. I sent out to the Human Services Council, come to our meeting today. I've sent out to other organizations. So I'd urge each of us that this is part of our educational commitment, is to make sure that our service on AHAC really is an opportunity to engage more people in the venture of affordable homes for all in Fairfax County. And, we need to push ourselves to reach out to others who we purport to represent to join us, because I think the more the merrier. And clearly it bodes well for our future if we got more in a YIMBY attitude towards this existential need in our county.
Thank you, Jerry. And I think likewise, as we can make people available, notify people of the other BAC, we heard about the Planning Commission. I know that Navaja is doing a budget discussion on housing next week. So we want to make sure that we're also taking our recommendations to CAB, and that was one of the recommendations here for our outreach.
I have an item. Yeah, as your NAACP representative, I want to mention I'm also on the COG committee on fair housing, that's going to release a report later this spring, a draft report on fair housing in the whole metropolitan area. And one of the things I'm very interested in is our latest Virginia legislation on source of income as being now a protected class, whereas landlords cannot reject a tenant because they want to pay with a voucher. And I think we've gotten quite a few more vouchers during COVID from HUD. And I don't know who's tracking this. We've got two organizations that deal with HUD and fair housing, but I'm wondering if Tom could provide us with some information on whether landlords are accepting those vouchers now that the law has changed. Do they understand that? And is that increasing the number of units that are available to people?
Mary, that law changed last year.
It did.
Yeah, and I think there was a real push by fair housing organizations to make sure that landlords understood that source of income was a protected class. That doesn't mean that there aren't violations still going on, but it has been on the books now for almost a year.
Correct. So I'm interested in knowing how it's working.
Great.
Certainly come back with some more information on that.
I would just like to thank Carrie and Judith for the great work they've done in pulling this all together and keeping it going. So thank you. I know it's not easy. There's a lot of work behind the scenes, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Judith is, as you all know, extraordinary, and we've had fun putting this together, but like all of you, ready for action. Then great. If I don't have any further comments, we will have some input to you. We will probably have, prior to our meeting, I certainly will have perhaps some budget recommendations and a draft of AHAC's statement that we'll want you all to weigh in on. And please, for those of you that are leading other coalitions and out there speaking, you can, by the way, reserve your slot today to testify before the public hearings. I know the Board of Supervisors doesn't always appreciate a 30-person team of people talking to them about affordable housing, but perhaps I know some groups will be coordinating that so that there is a story we can build and tell with AHAC's voice as well. And if there's, Tom, I know there's a housing symposium coming up. I just want to make sure we're not missing other events that we should all know about.
Yep. Housing Symposium is all day on March 17th. We are online just one more year. Hopefully we'll be back in person next year. We've already got almost 200 people signed up to attend. We've got a great set of panels and speakers, and we're real excited about it. So if you have not signed up to attend, please do so. And if you need more information about it, let us know.
Thank you. Judith, maybe could we include the link in the follow-up, to the link to register?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Dick, Jerry, thank you all very much. And we will see you online for the St. Patty's Day Housing Symposium. And then on March 25th at the Government Center, rooms 9 and 10. And Ken will be fully boosted by then. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Carrie.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye. Turn off. There you go. It's not you. Leave event. Okay.